so many people are filling their minds with stuff that is so unnecessary.
That's true. When information is cheap, attention becomes expensive, and it's easier to hijack attention via the brain stem. Choose your frames wisely. Some people go outside and they might just be walking around and be like, I don't get it. There's just trees.
You don't see it.
Oh, they're just trees. Oh my God. Oh, whatever. Let's go watch TV. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe if we added a little bit of Mozart.
Come with me on a little walk.
Bring your attention to the ordinary and reveal its extraordinary qualities. If it takes putting on a yellow-tinted lenses to make everything look like a French New Wave film, do it. If it takes adding some Mozart soundtrack to make this feel more like a movie, do it. You know, why? What is it? What is that quality of movies that we love to say, oh, it feels like a movie? And people will say, well, that's a movie. Reality's not like that. I'm like, no, it's not. It doesn't work like that. A movie is a construction, but it's also real. How I feel when I'm watching a movie is a real feeling in response to something I recognize. It may be a feeling that's rare, but it's the romantic abandon of a summer day. You know, it's the feeling of the endless summer. It's falling in love. It's a sunrise. It's a sunset. These are real modes of being. The minute you give close attention to anything, it becomes a miraculous thing. Henry Miller said that. And it's true. But that's a knobs and levers approach to your own consciousness. If you're thinking about paying your taxes all day or stressing about the rent, I get it.
And maybe most people are being framed in that what the narrative wants you to see.
That's right.
Michael Pilarczyk.
Michael Pilarczyk.
Michael Pilarczyk.
Also known as Mr. Mindset.
From a renowned DJ and TV host to a millionaire at 27.
I told you many years ago, you got a Rolls-Royce voice.
After losing all his money on the stock market,
he bounced back, made millions again, and then went on a journey of self-awareness.
He now is a best-selling author, speaker, and serial entrepreneur.
His insights guide people to transform their lives,
find clarity, and live with purpose.
A modern-day philosopher, filmmaker, and creative futurist, Mr. Jason Silva has inspired millions with his videos on his YouTube channel, Shots of Awe, exploring the intersection of science, human potential, and the miracles of life. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming someone whose mind moves at the speed of light. Welcome, Jason Silva.
Thank you, Michael.
Good to have you here.
It's a privilege to be here, and I must say you have a great voice.
Well, same to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I love listening to you. I started following you, well, way back when you started with Shots of Awe.
Yeah, wow.
And I think we have something similar. We'll discuss that today. We're big fans of Alan Watts.
Yes.
We have creative minds. Although I think you are a combination of Albert Einstein and Alan Watts.
Oh, that's interesting.
In modern times.
Okay, wow.
So
kind of you to say.
You're welcome.
I'll try to live up to it now.
My message to the world is to live your best life, live a meaningful life. What does that mean to you, living a meaningful life?
Well, it's interesting. You are commonly referred to as Mr. Mindset. And I think for me, a meaningful life has to do with mindset design or mind state design. I'm interested in what comparative literature professor David Lenson calls stewardship of internal life, which means taking control of your mind screen. What my friend Jamie Wheel calls a knobs and levers approach to hacking your own subjectivity so that your moods are not these like haphazard waves that come and go, but that give you some kind of agency over your inner life. And to do that, there's multiple approaches, of course. There's like the inner work or the inner engineering. But I also think a big part of it is exercising agency out in the world, right? And creating those feedback loops, because what we design in the world designs us in turn. And so for me, a meaningful life means leveraging or exploiting those feedback loops, right? Like realizing how much agency we have in shaping our inner world. I often use the analogy of filmmaking, like I want to design scenes and design moments and design frames, and I want to italicize those moments, and I want to color correct those moments, and I want to add a soundtrack to those moments. Like to the degree that I can, A meaningful life is one in which I have a sense that I can design beautiful moments that take my breath away. And to the degree that I'm able to design a moment that then inspires me, or that I exercise my agency to sort of create the circumstances that gave rise to ecstasy, that's a muscle that gets trained, and it then gives me a sense that I have more and more agency to do that. So for me, that's what it leads to. That's what it means to lead a meaningful life, is to leverage your capacity to really to steward your experience. I guess get a sense of control, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your life feels like a movie sometimes. I see you making all these movies on YouTube, on Instagram. And then I wonder, who is Jason Silva? And I ask this question myself all the time. If I have to describe myself in only one word only, what would it be? And I came up with, because I think I'm a teacher, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, but I'm most of all a creator. Mm-hmm. I love creating something, the property, the house, books, stories. If you have to describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
Well, I think a lot of people would probably say awe. And of course, my famous or somewhat known video series, Shots of Awe, that I've been doing for 15 years, was inspired by this concept. In positive psychology, awe is described as an experience of such perceptual expansion that your mental models of the world, your assumptions, your jadedness, the been there's and seen that's of the adult mind is sort of obliterated by the overwhelming encounter with something that exceeds your maps. And I would say that I am most myself when I am encountering things that exceed my maps, because everything feels like a fresh green breast of a new world. There's this continuous sense of like arriving at something splendorously novel and interesting. And perhaps because I'm from Venezuela, the whole world outside of Venezuela was an exotic place full of otherness. And there's a kind of a almost like aristocratic and aesthetic distance between me and that which is other. So I sort of treat my relationship with the world as if I'm a guy walking through a museum, And so the more that I can have an aesthetic relationship with everything I come across, the less I have to have a transactional relationship or an anxious relationship or a Darwinian relationship or a survivalist relationship. I want to have an aesthetic relationship. I want to be like, tell me the history of this mountain, or, this is how the people in this place evolved like this, or this is what the economy was like in this place. And so there's a practiced detachment that allows me to engage with things in contemplation, which I just get so much more pleasure from. But I should say that that's very deliberate, because there's an awareness that if I'm not in an aesthetic or contemplative, detached relationship with everything filled with curiosity, the opposite of that is more of a fear-based, anxious response, because I'm a very sensitive person. And so I can easily fall into the anxiety of the things that I come across. Like, how can this hurt me? Or how can this lead to catastrophe? Or what if this happens? Or what if that happens? And so because of that sensitivity, growing up again in Venezuela, the most beautiful country in the world, but my entire childhood was characterized by anxiety about being robbed or kidnapped, even in the most beautiful natural environment. And so it was a very deliberate self-rescue of sorts, where I was like, I have to make sure that my hypervigilance and my nervous system is calibrated so that I feel safe. Because once I feel safe, suddenly my awareness can move towards the contemplative and a different way of engaging with the world that is much more preferred to me, if that makes sense.
Well, you were born in Venezuela, but you grew up in Miami.
No, I moved to Miami when I was 18.
Okay.
But I should say that I grew up in Venezuela very much 50% Venezuelan, 50% expat life. So my mom's side of the family is half American. And so I grew up in a bilingual household where English and Spanish were completely interchangeable. I went to a Montessori school for elementary, and then for high school, I went to an international school. So that means that my classmates were a mix of like Venezuelan sort of upper class kids, but then embassy kids from all over the world, from Nigeria to Indonesia to China, and then like American kids whose parents worked at oil companies in Venezuela. So that it was like an American high school meets like the United Nations meets like Venezuelan rich kids, and it was a very interesting.
So you're really a global citizen.
Very much so. Third culture kid.
And then you moved to Amsterdam.
That's right.
Heaven on earth.
Very much so.
To you. Yeah?
Yeah. So I did university in Miami, and then I had a career, I think, as you know, as a TV presenter in Los Angeles and New York. I worked with National Geographic. I worked for a cable network that Al Gore had started called Current TV. And I had the American dream. I really did. And I came equipped already with the language, with the international, and also American sensibility. And I did the American dream. But then I grew tired of America, and I think it was because there wasn't enough room, enough bandwidth for the good, the true, and the beautiful, for appreciation of beauty and history. The rich intellectual life that I aspired to was incompatible with the hustle culture of America. So even though I had a great ride there, I needed something different, and that's where Amsterdam comes in.
But why Amsterdam? Because there's so many beautiful places in Europe.
Yeah.
You could have gone to Rome or Paris or maybe London or Barcelona, Madrid, Mallorca.
Yeah. I think Amsterdam has a strange and beautiful constellation of attributes. I started going to Amsterdam. I mean, the first time I went when I was backpacking through Europe as a college student, and of course, that time I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up in the red light district, a little too stoned, and I was like, I don't like this place. But I returned in like 2012, 2013 with my Shots of Awe crew. So I had my videographer, my producer, and the director. And the three of us had shot in California, and we were like, oh, we should go make a bunch of videos in Europe. And I was like, well, let's go to Amsterdam. Why? Well, because we can just... we can land there, we can rent bikes. It just seemed like a more frictionless landing. And what happened really is that through the shooting of content there, I fell in love with what you might call the set and setting. The environment was supportive of a kind of fluidity and freedom and mobility that I noticed as sharply contrasting the traffic, car-based culture of like the New York or the Los Angeles or the Miami or even the Caracas where I grew up. I mean, to me, walking through cobblestone streets, walking through 17th century canals, I mean, was essentially an open-air museum, right? Like I was there making art, but then I realized that the entire backdrop of the city itself was like being inside of an art piece. And so an open-air museum that also has an infrastructure that supports fluid movement by bicycle, well, that reminded me of Burning Man, where all the creative artists are moving around on their bikes, and there's this freewheeling sense of liberation and the absence of friction. Like there's just fluidity and flow. And then I started reading more about this, and I, of course, saw that bicycle culture leads to human flourishing, that Amsterdam the Netherlands has the happiest children in the world, the #1 most bike-friendly country in the world. And I just saw this whole relationship between the built environment and what I at least perceived as the consciousness of the people, like the village life and the village vibe was very different than the average experience that I had of people in like New York City or even Los Angeles.
But you still have that same kind of feeling right now, because Amsterdam changed a lot over the last 10, 12 years.
Sure. I think that I'm probably less privy to those changes, primarily because I compare myself to the character in Midnight in Paris, Gil Pender. He moves to Paris. He's like, I love Paris, and I feel like I'm in the 1920s, and all my favorite artists used to sit in these cafes and eat baguettes and write poetry. Like, I have a romantic lens that I put upon the city, and I have a relationship with the city that is primarily aesthetic. And because I work for myself, I'm not embedded in the machinations of the socioeconomic machinations of the everyday. I just see the poetry. So I'm walking around in a visual environment that doesn't antagonize my romantic lens. lens. It reinforces it.
So actually, you're living in your own simulation of Amsterdam.
That's right.
Because that's where I want to go to. Do you think we live in a simulated world? Is the Matrix more a documentary than science fiction?
It depends on your level of analysis.
What do you think? If I listen to you, you create your own reality in your mind.
Very much so. But again, when you ask the question of whether we live in a simulation, I think about, depending on what level of analysis you're thinking about it, right? Like the psychedelic philosopher, Robert Anton Wilson, he talked about the fact that we live in reality tunnels. But he was talking about like linguistic reality tunnels and cultural reality tunnels and religious reality tunnels. And these become like interpretive frameworks, like we see with those lenses and we see through those lenses, but we don't always see the lenses themselves. But as a person that grew up in a bilingual international environment, that was like, my day-to-day life was what people only experience when they do like exotic travel. Like every single day I would take off the lenses of like interacting with like, my grandfather's Venezuelan driver, for example, or interacting with the Spanish teacher in the school who was Venezuelan. And then I'd take off those lenses and I'd be talking to the guy from Taiwan and hearing about his inner life, or the guy from Iran and hearing about his religion. And so what it made me it gave me a multi-perspectival take on the world and realizing that yes, on one level of analysis, we live inside of these like linguistic, cultural reality tunnels, but we can swap those lenses and that there's multiple ways of seeing the world and of interpreting reality. So on that level of analysis, yes, I think different cultures live in different matrices, and there's some that are more conducive to human flourishing than others, like I think so.
But you are a very positive guy. You're happy. You can see it in your eyes, the way you behave, the way you move. But if I walk in Amsterdam nowadays, I don't see people like you. There's some, but most people, I paint a picture, they're gray. They're gray. Their thinking is negative.
Sure.
There's a lot of anxiety. There's polarity.
Yeah.
I wish everyone would be like you.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality I see in Amsterdam.
I think that you probably have a perspective on Amsterdam that is more granular. Simply, you see details that I don't by virtue of the fact that you grew up there.
That could be.
And are privy to more changes. You also speak the language natively. So you just pick up information that I don't pick up on. In some ways, my romantic lens edits out certain things from the frame. I simply don't see those things. I simply don't hear those things. And there's a phrase called ignorance is bliss. I think sometimes ignorance is bliss, other times ignorance is stupid. But when it comes to a romantic lens, like my dad was talking to me about this yesterday because I read the news a lot, the world news. So I worry a lot about politics in America, and I worry a lot about the future of the relationship between the U.S. and Europe and alliances and what if Russia invades and all this stuff, And my dad will often tell me, he's like, how much of this is going to have a direct impact in your everyday life and your everyday experience. Like, unless your day-to-day reality is directly affected, why are you taking on that anxiety? Why are you taking the weight of all these things you cannot control?
Good question.
Right. I mean, unless it becomes like World War II levels where people are being put on trains and massacred, and then, okay, fine, pay attention to that. But I already in Venezuela, like, I'm privy to like what a real national emergency looks like. Like I have seen a country collapse. And so that already means that I have a proclivity to catastrophize and panic. So as an act to protect my well-being, I was like, well, compared to Venezuela, Amsterdam is the most stable place on the planet. Compared to the economic difficulties faced by Venezuelan people, the Dutch live in the Garden of Eden. Compared to like...
You really think that?
Very much so. Compared even to children in America with helicopter parenting, I heard the other day that a woman got arrested because her child like walked like 30 feet away from the house, or kids in you see a place like the Netherlands where the kids are independent, the kids are riding on the back and front of bicycles with their parents. Like I feel, to my eyes, to what I can see without necessarily having the granular take on it that you have, I see a campus of human flourishing. I see a city that looks like a liberal arts university campus where people are moving around on bicycles with their dogs instead of sitting in gridlock
You
traffic.
should run for president.
I should be the Dutch president. No, I tell it to my friend Matthias all the time. I'm like, I wish the city of Amsterdam made me some kind of cultural ambassador, because I think that in some ways you don't know what you have, and this is a curse that human beings have. We aren't ever fully able to appreciate what is natively ours.
Yeah.
That's just a fact because of habituation, because we take it for granted, and because by virtue of its familiarity, we're really only salient to what's wrong, rather than the basic appreciation of the fact that you live in an open-air museum with layers of historicity, and every day is an opportunity to be in a state of contemplation, like a tourist, like a traveler. I think of myself as a flaneur. The flaneur is the walking philosopher. And I think that this really began for me from the resonance that I felt from, I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Linklater, the filmmaker. So he has these iconic films that he made called Before Sunrise and Before Sunset. And these films are about these two characters, an American guy and a French girl, that meet on a train in Vienna. And then they decide to get off on the city and just walk around. They've never been there before. They're just walking around Vienna, philosophizing, talking about life. Now, I'm sure that if you ask the local people in Vienna, they have plenty of things to complain about, plenty of things they're pissed off about. But to this American and French girl, just strolling around without a care in the world, with no real like socioeconomic transactional relationship with the place, everything is just a splendorous subject or object worthy of aesthetic consideration. Now, granted, that is a very privileged lens with which to behold the world or behold your immediate environment. But to the degree that you can even bring a little bit of that to part of your day, part of your day that is not in the socioeconomic and that doesn't have the critical lens, but that can just appreciate, wow, I live in a place where I can cycle everywhere. Wow, I live in a place where the parks are safe and full of children. Like, wow, I live in a place that is just so fundamentally rich as compared to many other places in the world. And I think for me, it was a very deliberate desire to look for a place where I was not so automatically able to cast judgment the way that I had become cursed with passing judgment in places like Venezuela and increasingly in America.
You just turned 43.
That's the rumor.
I heard. And you look like in your 20s still.
Oh, thanks, bro.
Yeah.
So do you.
Yeah, thank you. Have you ever thought about children, raising a family?
Yeah. And to answer your question, here's where I owe so much to Amsterdam. Children were not even part of my consideration until I moved to Amsterdam. It was just, granted, as a successful creative and artist and working in television and doing a lot of corporate speaking and traveling the world, I'm the first to admit that there is an arrested development of sorts where I'm like pretending that I'm still an adolescent, and, oh yeah, kids are just something you do in the future. Yeah, whatever. I'm still a child, But turning 40 hit me a little bit because I was like, when you're in your 30s, there's still this sense of like a certain amount of runway. Like I'll deal with that eventually. And I know that, women probably feel that biological clock with even more urgency. But definitely for me, like turning 40 was like, well, if I am ever going to do this thing that is a big part of the human experience, like I have to consider now time horizons for the first time, And as somebody who's sort of anxious about temporality in general and is diametrically opposed to the idea of mortality. It wasn't until I was having sense impressions, right? Like continuously flooding my system that were like, in my view, beatific visions. Like I'm not exaggerating when I say that like cycling through the Dutch countryside and seeing a mother with a bakfiets and like these gorgeous little blonde babies on the front, to me is almost like a mirage from like utopia. It doesn't even seem real. Now you can probably add the fact that I've maybe had a little bit of cannabis and I'm listening to music with my wearable speaker and I have my orange colored lenses and I'm moving, that makes it all seem even more cinematic, more like I'm looking at a living postcard. But it was the place that continuously through these romantic visions and imprinted them in my retina, where I all of a sudden started seeing myself or wanting to see myself in that role. I was like, oh man, imagine having a child in this country where it's like, instead of putting the crying baby on a car seat, you're throwing them on a back feeds and just going through the countryside listening to Chopin, Like, I just imagine myself taking my child on a back feeds and like putting them with a wearable speaker and playing the Beatles or the Beach Boys or like music from the 60s. And like finally I felt like Amsterdam was like a set piece for my romantic reverie. Like it was like I can create a movie for myself and for my children and have that continuously be imprinted in their nervous system. So a very, very conscious form of like parenting or engineering the consciousness of my children. And it didn't even cross my mind as a feasible thing until Amsterdam. And the reason for that was I didn't want to go back to Venezuela, where it was like, yeah, we had a beautiful big house with giant walls and electric fences, and inside the walls, childhood was amazing, but outside you might get kidnapped, you might get robbed, the police are corrupt, it's a scary place, the country's collapsing, the military's taking over the government. So I was like, I don't want to have a kid where it just becomes someone, in that kind of reality. I need to have a kid in a place where I can enter the consciousness of the child and the environment does not antagonize that. Like I really want to have to raise a child without any hypervigilance. I want children to be able to be children. I don't want to cast them or traumatize them with the trauma of the parent, which happens in a lot of places.
And why not here on the island? Because we have to explain this, why we are here.
Sure.
We have a common friend, our camera guy, Tony. Mm-hmm. He's your neighbor in Amsterdam
very close.
And we're neighbors here on the island of Mallorca.
That's right. That's right.
So that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
We left the Netherlands in Amsterdam. We were living in Amsterdam for about 3 years on the Brouwersgracht, close to where you live.
Very close.
Very, very nice area.
Yeah.
I really loved it.
Yeah.
But let's pretend you're 43, I'm 55 now.
Yeah.
We're going to raise some babies, raise a new family. I'd rather do it here on the island because, it's all nature.
Yeah.
It's peaceful.
Yeah.
No stress.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we left the busyness and the atmosphere of the Netherlands because I think here it's maybe like a fairy tale, but we really love it here. It's so peaceful. And I think in my vision, it's better to raise children in an area here, in nature, outside, than they're packed in boxes in schools, 30, 40 kids in a classroom. I don't know. What's your opinion?
Well, that's a valid point. And I'm in Mallorca now, part-time as well. I bought a home here. And I'm very close with my family. So me, my brother, and my half-sister, we frequently come to the house that I bought, and my father is kind of taking care of it when we're not there. He's
the lucky one.
He recently moved here from Venezuela. Yeah. And I think, in a way it's like, how do you... I wish I could bridge both realities because there's no doubt that like a house in nature on a really nice piece of land, that gives you an incredible serenity. Like you don't really feel the need to even leave the property. You just want to like hang out in your Garden of Eden, and it becomes like I was saying about your property. It's like you turned inside out. It's like there's rooms to dream and rooms to relax and rooms to make art, and just like my own mind and my own moods, like you're turning yourself inside out. And you can do that when you have a house in nature with some space and some land. I think when I raise kids, I would like to do both, if that's possible. Maybe I can do like April to September in the Netherlands, and then in October pop down to Mallorca. Now that there's a lot of privilege in there. And
why not? Mm-hmm. Why not?
Yeah.
In today's world, it's pretty tough to do that. But why not? So many people are traveling around, digital nomads. Why not take your kids wherever you go? Yeah. And you can place them in a school. Let's say you go to Bali for 2 months, and you can kids to school there.
That's right.
Why not?
Well, I completely support that idea, and I'm a huge fan of the whole concept of being a digital nomad and how the best technology just extends your capacities and then gets out of the way. Like, I think more and more, especially as we incorporate AI into our lives, the kind of productivity and creativity that will be born from that should be liberating to the human species, you know, in ways that we cannot even fathom. But as a model for what that might look like is like, let's say a really successful digital nomad who works a couple hours a week from his laptop becomes a poster child, and like more and more people will have that kind of lifestyle. It is my hope on the back of these technologies. And so to that end, why not be seasonal, and why not at least look for the possibility of schools, alternative schools that can be like that, seasonal as well. You know, that my kids could go from a Dutch school part of the year to like a Mallorca school the other part of the year. Like I'm fully in support of that idea, and I think that's kind of the lifestyle that I want. And then, of course, add some travel in there as well. You know, I want my life to feel like, to the degree that it can, I want to experience safari consciousness as often as possible. You know, safari consciousness is what you feel when you're like in the African safari out in the bush, where you're just kind of like a passenger, and it's like a new world, and everywhere you look, you're in a state of soft fascination. Like that qualitative intensity of being really present and really immersed in where you're at is a state of being that I just adore. You know, whenever I can be in that kind of a flow and that present, I make notes. I'm like, what are the elements that gave rise to the way I feel? You know, oh, you need a little bit of novelty, you need a little bit of movement, you need some space, some nature, like all of these ingredients that go back to the idea of like stewardship of your experience, like a knobs and levers approach, like being on the DJ booth and like moving some knobs around and be like, I need a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And I think mindfulness, I think, can bring people to the realization of just how much more agency they have than they realized, you know. And I think that's a thing. A lot of people feel disempowered. They feel like they don't have a lot of agency. But I think if you pay attention, you can kind of reverse engineer your inner states and learn how to design the life you want.
Do you live a mindful life? Do you meditate?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think I meditate. I don't follow a meditation practice that is easily recognizable as among the popular meditations. I tell people I like meditation with content. And so I'm less interested in the idea of like empty your mind and more interested in the idea of like, when I'm not in the transactional realm, I'm meditating. When I'm beholding a beautiful tree or a beautiful mountain or a beautiful little Dutch village, I am meditating. Yeah. And so I like active meditations.
Yeah, so you're in the moment.
Yes. I fall into a meditative trance when I'm in a flow state. For me, a flow state is interchangeable with meditation. Or I
agree. Yeah.
I saw this writer. He was saying that a flow state is a series of aha moments extended in time. You're just like, aha, whoa, aha. But it's when action and awareness merge. And for me, this could be my constitution, my neurochemistry. Action and awareness tend to merge when there's motion. When I'm in the movie. Why do they call it a movie? Because it's moving from frame to frame, from scene to scene, like from page to page. When there's motion, the content of my experience gives me more pleasure.
But it has also to do on what you focus on. Because you focus on the good, you focus on the positive, you focus on the flow state.
Yes.
Why do you think so many people focus on the negative? Because it's if you go back to what you just said, you're still watching the news.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Why should you? But many people do. Yeah. And it creates their vision on, their perception on reality.
Yeah, it's a bad habit.
It's a bad habit.
I think I still do that as a part of the remnant of the hypervigilance and the PTSD that I have from Venezuela. Like a part of me is just making sure that there's still time in case I need to pack up and leave kind of thing.
But you're really afraid of events happening like that? Like in the World War?
Well, I play things out.
Yeah?
Like I play things out. So, you know, if I hear about like, you know, Trump pulling the U.S. out of NATO and Russia potentially like invading Europe or you know, if weaponized AI creates a surveillance state where we don't have any freedom. I mean, some of the stuff that I saw during COVID really frightened me. The Netherlands actually was among the least frightening places, but you see places like, well, compared to what I saw in like France or Spain, where you were imprisoned in your apartment and you needed a permission slip to go downstairs. I mean, I went to the Netherlands during most of COVID, and I was like, hey, if I have my bike and I'm doing my thing, I can be outside, or I can be with, you know, they just said avoid crowds and avoid indoor spaces. That still seemed relatively sensible in the information landscape of not knowing if this virus was going to kill us or not. But at least I felt like I could move around. But what I saw in France and Spain and some of these places where you were imprisoned in your apartment, like that was really panic-inducing for me, like extremely.
And why do you think all these events happen? You know, Russia, States, Europe, migrant from Africa, the climate change, whatever, you know, all the stories, all the narratives.
Sure.
Do you believe in all those narratives, or is it all made up by, I don't know, some guy somewhere?
Well, I think that, you know, some people say the world was always falling apart, no matter when you lived, you know, no matter how much you romanticize the past or whatever. Like, the world was always falling apart and the world was always magnificent simultaneously.
Yeah.
I think that it's a unique situation where our technology is such that we can be bombarded continuously with a sense of like immediacy and simultaneity with everything that's happening everywhere all at once.
Yeah. That's the difference.
Yes, and brains that will respond more to fear-based stimuli, because that goes to the brainstem and the survivalist instinct. And then you have the business model that incentivizes attention. So what you have is a series of bad incentives, like negatively pre-configured feedback loops, where it's like the technology bombards you with immediacy and instantaneousness with everything happening in the world. We pay more attention to what's dangerous because it goes right back to us being like early hominids in Africa and what's around that burning bush or what's around that rustling bush because it's going to kill. And so I'm not beyond that. It doesn't matter how conscious I am. I can sometimes raise my awareness above that, but I still get triggered. I still hear, the transatlantic alliance is going to collapse. And I'm like, what's going to happen? You know, is Amsterdam going to be filled with like Russian troops? You know, is it going to be like World War II? I live very close to Anne Frank's house, you know. So I have those kinds of panics. Plus I have a direct experience of that happening in Venezuela, where the government was like seizing your property and the government was like restricting what people could say or do and shutting down newspapers. And so it just makes it so that I'm aware on one level of reality that like the world was always kind of falling apart, and all you can really do is live in the world that you live in and do the best you can and give back if you can. But at the same time, I sometimes just can't help what was my experience in the past and not wanting to ever feel that helpless and vulnerable again.
Yeah.
You know? And then of course the information landscape that reinforces those anxious loops. It's problematic.
Let's go back to our newborn babies.
Yes, please.
To be born babies.
Yes.
In 5 or 10 years, what will their world be like? We have the 2030 agenda. People are talking about, you know, what's going to happen to us, to the world. So 2030, 2035.
Yeah.
Well, you're a futurist.
Oh, yeah.
What is that, a futurist?
Well, it was a label given to me because I was doing a tremendous amount of content related to exponential technologies. Yeah. So
You're very much into AI.
I'm very much into
new technology,
radical longevity and transcendence of human limitation, and that originates in just a real big, not just fear, but existential disquietude when it comes to like mortality and finality. Like I believe, like O'Shaughnessy said, we are the music makers and we are the dreamers of dreams. Like creatures that make space telescopes that can mainline space and time through the optic nerve. Creatures that can build wireless communications where we can basically communicate telepathically across the planet. Creatures that make aircrafts with 1 million moving parts that hurl us across continents. Like, that is incompatible with human beings whose bodies deteriorate and die and are buried under the ground. Like, it's just, we're gods and worms at the same time. And since I was a child, I found that very existentially disquieting, particularly because it meant that I was marveling. I was enthralled by the sheer miraculousness of nature and our innovation technology and our imagination. But then I had to like conceive that one day the people I love are going to die and disappear forever. And granted, we don't know the whole story. I don't know if...
What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know.
You have no idea?
I mean, I'll tell you what. There are moments inside of music and cinema and art, moments of transcendence and inspiration that seem a lot more plausible than death. The way I feel when I listen to a song that I love feels more important, more foundational, more solid than the idea of mortality. Like the good, the true, and the beautiful. Like art and the sublime seems to be more fundamental than mortality. But you know, I'm not in the song all the time, you know, like I also see people getting sick and all of a sudden, where's the song for that? You know, like, so anyway, that was making me look for some way to alleviate that, intolerable sense that I just this is not compatible with me and I need to resolve this existentially. And so it became a two-pronged approach. Like one was art, music, poetry. Like this is my pathway to transcendence. This is my religious vocation. This is my existential answer to the human condition. Make art and live inside the good, the true, and the beautiful. And then to hedge my bets, I also got really into technological futurism because I was like, this stuff is actually based on data-driven extrapolation, real results. Supercomputers went from being half a building in size to fitting in our pockets. We have access to all the world's knowledge and information. Like, watch a video about quantum computing. Like, I mean, we're harnessing the forces of nature and entering God mode increasingly. And I got really excited about radical longevity, biotechnology. What happens when biology becomes an information technology? What happens when biology becomes programmable, like our iOS devices? Does this mean downloading new genetic code that shrinks cancer, tumors, or potentially radically extends life? I would say drank the Kool-Aid to accept that there was data-driven extrapolation. I mean, it wasn't just faith-based. It was like, here are the trends, look what's happened and look what's coming. And I started making videos about that, and my videos became like a kind of punk rock futurism. I brought my love of art, poetry, and storytelling to these ideas, and then I went viral and became like a corporate keynote speaker, motivating audiences for companies like Microsoft, Oracle, Intel, Electronic Arts, Adobe, Bose, Google, you name them, I've spoken there. Presidents of countries, royal families. And for me, it was just, again, it was like, well, this is what's happening, but what does it mean? Because it's not just about like, oh, we're going to become robots. That's such a impoverished perspective. Like, it's more like these tools and technologies become scaffoldings and extensions of human agency, which is a reflection of human creativity and imagination. And so if you zoom out far enough, what it really comes down to is the imagination is summoning its own literalization. What we once conceived of in the mind has like been 3D printed out in the world, like your laptop or your iPhone. I mean, and so what the trend is looking like, and maybe we are, as Carl Sagan said, a way for the cosmos to know itself. But it's looking like imagination is a cosmological force, as real as the second law of thermodynamics. David Deutsch, he says, we're chemical scum, but we're chemical scum that dream of distant quasars. You know, he talks about how in the early universe, big dumb things called the shots, and everything else was meaningless. But then with life, something shifted. Now you could have things like photosynthesis, and all of a sudden a tiny chemical reaction could transform and terraform a planet. So that we went from a universe in which big dumb things dictated the terms to small things like life and now intelligence potentially shaping the cosmos. Mm-hmm. And so his view is that if you take these exponential technologies and run them all the way through, we're going to become star makers. We're going to make Dyson spheres, you know. And for me, that narrative is very exciting because it says not only are we going to make art, but we're going to learn to sing the songs that orchestrate the universe. You know, it's like what beautiful, I think it was Flaubert. He said, human speech is but a cracked kettle in which we tap crude rhythms while we long to make music that will melt the stars. And that's how I feel, right? Like, I'm just like, when I am encountering the good, the true, and the beautiful, as far as I'm concerned, every impulse in my body wants to like it internalize directionally that qualia, that energy, that feeling. I'm just like, we are here. We are a creative part of the universe, a novelty engendering engine, and I think it's our responsibility to accelerate that process. And we must live our lives so well that death will tremble to take us. That's what I think. I could go on a rant, as you can tell.
I hear. Yeah, no, that sounds really, really romantic, poetic.
I think so. Yeah.
And I agree, but you know, there are just a few poets in the world. Not everyone is like you,
right?
And we have to create this new reality, this new future all together. And with all the events going on in today's world, what will today's world be look like 10 years from now? You know, just for average people, maybe for you it's different.
Yeah.
You create your own reality.
Yeah.
I try to design my own life.
Yeah.
As I hope many people will do.
Yes.
But if you can make a picture, a photograph of the world in 10 years from now, what does it look like?
I think there's a very good chance that economics built on scarcity completely fall away, and that we really have a shift towards something where people don't really need to work anymore. I think it's possible to see something as fundamentally life-altering as harnessing electricity for the first time. I think the trends, the exponentials on AI, you know, one thing is to be bullish, something else is to be like a real shattering of our frameworks of what it means to be human, what it means to have a society. I think it's entirely possible that we reach a level of prosperity that would have been unimaginable, that people don't need to work anymore.
Because of AI.
Yes, that AI just kind of takes care of everything, and that people fill their days not with jobs but with passions and hobbies. Like,
and AI will do the job.
AI will take care of everything that is sort of like cleaning the garbage, recycling the food.
So where does our money come from to pay the bills?
I think it's a bit like Jeremy Rifkin's book, The Zero Marginal Cost Society. I think the price point of everything goes to zero. I think the idea of pricing things, it becomes obsolete. I think it's just completely obsolete.
Can you imagine a world without money? Is it realistic in the future?
Well, here's the thing. What I imagine is a microcosm. So think of a really, really wealthy liberal arts university with a gorgeous campus, and assume that all the students that are there either have their tuition paid for or are on scholarship. Within the internal logic of that university, that is a world without money. Yeah. That is just a beautiful campus, you know, living in the sublime, thinking about art, thinking about the timeless
as it used
things.
to be in small villages, in the tribe.
Sure.
You take care of each other.
Perhaps, perhaps it'll have a sense of that kind of tribal animism, you know, where you're in complete synergy with your environment. You know, maybe it's that tribal consciousness with like Buckminster Fuller kind of tech that is technology that integrates with the environment. But like, I mean, the reason this is so unimaginable to people is it's not just the AI, right? It's infusing intelligence into everything. So biology becomes as programmatic as computer code, and atoms become as programmatic as computer code. So when you're patterning and programming atoms instead of ones and zeros, now you have buildings that self-assemble. Like you write some code and you hit execute and the building self-assembles. And here's a way of understanding what nanotechnology is, because it's nature. When I plant a seed in the soil, that seed is an information file. Mm-hmm. And that seed instructs the atoms around it, the soil. It gives it the instruction to self-assemble into a tree according to specified guidelines. But that's like nanotechnology. So imagine if you accelerate the speed at which seeds turn into trees, but those seeds can have the instruction to turn into buildings, to turn into organs, to replace human failing organs, like anything. When you're dealing with atoms, you move into a world of radical abundance. It's like taking a psychedelic trip. It's like everything that you thought had a boundary on it becomes fluid. And it's just like living in an imaginal space. I really do think it's going to parallel what people experience on psychedelics, but it's going to be technologically mediated.
Don't you think that we're interfering too much with nature then, or becoming our own God, taking care of how we create our own universe?
I mean, I think that I don't think that we're separate from nature. So I think that's sort of a linguistic misnomer, right? Like if it exists, the laws of physics, permit it. And so I think that a laptop is just as natural as a tree.
Oh, yeah?
Very much so.
Okay.
Very much so. And it's what's interesting about what we make is that we rearrange matter so that it suddenly has transcendent effects. If I take all the materials in your laptop, all the plastic, all the metal, everything there, and I just, disorganize it and show it as just a pile of material, it's pretty inert, but you arrange it in a certain way and it has transcendent effects. Like now it can take your poetry and transmit it to a human across the planet. Same with an airplane. And so when you put matter, you recontextualize matter or reorganize matter in a certain way, it's still nature, but it's nature with new functions. So I see us as another program that is exotropic, that is the opposite of entropy.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think we have to change our awareness, our human consciousness, to create, let's say, a better world for our future?
I think a lot of people have a very narrow perceptual experience of themselves and of the world because they are...
That's your perception.
Well, I think that people are constrained by a...
But do you think these people know that they have a narrow-minded awareness?
I think if challenged on the street, I think no, because they would just collapse into being antagonized and argue why they're in the right perspective or they know what's this or that. Yeah. But I think deep down in their private selves, in their private moments, when they're vulnerable and unguarded, and maybe they listen to some opera music and they get a tear in their eye thinking about their child or their dog or a sunset that they remember one day with somebody they loved. They realize there's more to life than the survivalist mindset. There's something transcendent related to what it means to be human, something poetic that is innate to our nature, that is thwarted by circumstance a lot of the times. And so the human, I would say, part of what it means to progress civilizationally, that one of the metrics beyond GDP should also be like, do people have more bandwidth in their lives to be in the transcendent dimension of being?
Should this, what you just described, be more in our educational system?
Yes.
Shouldn't this be taught to children, to people?
Yes. And I think it should be when economic survival isn't necessary anymore. I mean, even modern schools and educational system, the whole idea of the classroom and that was kind of went alongside the Industrial Revolution. It was like, well, how do we make these factory employees? How do we institute an educational system that socializes the children into compliance to fit in the world? But the whole thing needs to be rethought. And I really think the answer lies actually in a return to the humanities. Thinking about things like poetry and thinking about things like history, the humanities really.
Let's reinvent the world.
Definitely.
Because if I listen to you, I hear we are still in survival mode. That's the educational system.
Yes.
You go to school. You are being.
Yes.
Well, they produce assets.
Yes.
Children are produced into assets.
Yes.
To work, to make money for corporates.
Sure.
And just a few people like you and like Alan Watts said are poets. Mm-hmm. Writers, authors, filmmakers, whatever, storytellers.
Yes.
And people are storytellers, but they listen to the negative stories they tell themselves in their minds.
No doubt.
And how can we make that change that more and more people will start believing in our vision that if you change the story in your mind, you can change your outside life?
For sure. Well, I think hopefully, a lot of these transformations will just be inevitabilities because of the changing feedback loops. As the world changes, people respond to that world, and then they think about the world differently, which then changes their actions in the world. And so I see a series of figure eights, a series of feedback loops where these things, the world changes and we change in response to the world changing. But it's more interesting, of course, if we can bring conscious mindfulness to that change rather than something that just happens to us passively, but that we sort of become not just stewards, but active co-participants in shaping those loops. And I think one way that you and I do that is simply through the publishing of our material. I think we have an approach to it that feels like, well, there's a way to scale awareness and a way of scaling consciousness through planting seeds in people's minds, and that must be what compels us to put our ideas out in the world, right? Like I could have all of my recordings and reflections just in my hard drive on my archive at home, but there's still this I don't know, naive optimism maybe that just feels like, oh no, maybe resonance can spread the way music can spread, like a jingle can spread, and then people are repeating the jingle over and over again because it was resonant. Like if you put something out in the world that's beautiful, it might get bookmarked in the mind, and it might then be recalled in response to a situation, and I can be potentially a participant in shaping the positive feedback loops in people's lives. And I feel you probably feel the same way.
Yeah. You're on social media because that's part of your job.
Sure.
But are you on social media privately also or not? Do you use it?
You mean do I...
Do you scroll?
Instead of just publishing, you mean?
Yeah. I don't.
Good for you. I have a mixed relationship with that. For a long time, I thought it was just everybody suddenly has a voice, and that is very romantic. But
it's great.
I'm not. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm also a bit of a snob, and there's some people that have a big voice that I think, this person shouldn't have a voice. They're only polluting the world and polluting our brains.
Yeah.
That's a subjective judgment, but I do feel like the microphone should come with a certain kind of responsibility, and I think a lot about the film Dead Poets Society and Robbie Williams, and I'm like, if you don't have that kind of education and that kind of sensibility, maybe you shouldn't have a big mic because you have no business telling people how to think and what to do. But that's my opinion. I use the internet as a publishing platform, the social media as a publishing platform. But I do go on...
Because you have a story to tell. That's why you need it.
Yeah, for sure.
Use it.
But I also will browse Instagram sometimes. Just... I don't know. I like seeing beautiful women in beautiful places.
No, true.
I'm like, oh, wow, this person's traveling in Bali. That palace looks really cool. Okay, add it to my list of an interesting place to explore. But here's the thing. I have my notifications off. So my phone doesn't vibrate every time I get a like or a hit. Nothing is prompting me back into the apps. All the notifications are off. So I go into an app when I sort of feel like, maybe I shouldn't do this as much, but let's see what's going on in the news. I usually do it once or twice a day.
I still don't get why you read the news. But
that's the Venezuelan backstory.
Yeah.
I just
it's your trauma
in my lifetime. In my lifetime, I've seen politically existential events make it so that a place is not safe to live anymore.
But many people are living, in my opinion, they're living in their phone.
Oh yeah.
Their only awe is what they see, which is real, but it's not their reality.
No, for sure.
And then, I scrolled in
But
your
they're like
Instagram
they're like
this week.
crackheads.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's a dopamine. That's like people sitting in a casino hitting the slot machine for like 8 hours, and you walk through a casino, they look so depressed. They're just sitting there drinking Coca-Cola and just hitting the slot machine. I mean, yes, no doubt that there are people that have like horrendously unhealthy relationships with social media that is akin to like seeing a morbidly obese person and thinking, wow, what happened between them and their relationship with food? For sure. But that's not the I mean, yes, the technology has the wrong incentives, but it's also people that don't have enough inner will. Talk about agency and will. Like
Discipline.
I'm a tremendously disciplined person, and I'm even disciplined about my surrender.
Well, I was watching your Instagram, and you were hiking on the mountains here on the island. And in my opinion, you love Amsterdam, but you also love nature.
Oh, hell yeah.
And then you can live in awe because you see what's really there.
Oh, yeah.
Not only in your phone.
Yeah. Well, don't forget that even in Amsterdam, I have an e-bike and I'm cycling in nature all the time. I'm going to the dunes. I'm going to Amsterdam Noord, into the countryside. I'm going to Amsterdam Forest. Like I go have my poetic days outside the city, and then I love coming back into the village, for the end of the day. Yeah. But yeah, no, I am around nature all the time. I mean, I'm outside all day, every day.
Should people be more outside in nature to experience more awe, to be more one with nature?
Yes, they should. And I think that there is a way to embellish nature. And again, back to the analogy of filmmaking. Like some people go outside and until the shift happens, until they go into that trance, they might just be walking around and be like, I don't get it. There's just trees.
You don't see it.
Oh, they're just trees. Oh my God. Oh, whatever. Let's go watch TV. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe if we added a little bit of Mozart, maybe you put a wearable speaker on them, add a little bit of Mozart. I like to buy color therapy sunglasses. I'm a really big fan of a company called Loving Victorious Beings out of Ibiza. And they make colored lenses, sunglasses, like deep orange, yellow. And I describe it as like walking into an Instagram filter. People say, oh, the world doesn't look like that. That's a filter. I'm like, well, like everything is filtered through your senses. Why not just like add some conscious filters? Like they bring your attention to the ordinary and reveal its extraordinary qualities. If it takes putting on a yellow tinted lenses to make everything look like a French New Wave film, do it. If it takes adding some Mozart soundtrack to make this feel more like a movie, do it. What is it? What is that quality of movies that we love to say, oh, it feels like a movie? And people will say, well, that's a movie. Reality's not like that. I'm like, no, it's not. It doesn't work like that. A movie is a construction, but it's also real. How I feel when I'm watching a movie is a real feeling in response to something I recognize. It may be a feeling that's rare, but it's the romantic abandon of a summer day. It's the feeling of the endless summer. It's falling in love. It's a sunrise. It's a sunset. These are real modes of being. The Greeks talk about going from Kronos to Kairos. So making the world feel like in a movie is really saying seeing the world through the lens of kairos, the timeless, the suchness of things, Aldous Huxley, seeing things in all of their suchness. Like there's a difference between, oh, well, that's just a duck floating in the water to like, oh my God, look at those ducks. They're so cute. Like the minute you give close attention to anything, it becomes a miraculous thing. Henry Miller said that. And it's true. But that's a knobs and levers approach to your own consciousness. If you're thinking about paying your taxes all day or stressing about the rent, I get it. That duck is not going to reveal itself in all of its duckness to you. No. And so it's takes a lot of consciousness and deliberate mediation of your capacity to attend to things. And there's some privilege there too. I acknowledge that.
Your new project is called the Psychedelic Puppets. It looks amazing.
Thanks, brother.
It really does. But why? Tell me.
Sure.
Why? What's the meaning?
So I'm always exploring different ways of communicating my reverie. So I like to be inspired. I like to be elevated. I like to be in a state of rhapsody. I do. I'm a bliss junkie. And from that place is where I communicate my songs, my poetry. A lot of my poetic transmissions, I like to say, are very much invocations. Like they're meant to be felt and they're meant to evoke because they come in direct response to an elevated state. And I'm always exploring ways to make sure that my representation, that the art that I make doesn't just point the way, but evokes the way. It evokes what it's talking about. And so that's where it becomes creatively interesting. Well, how do I communicate this? What kind of lenses do I use? What kind of color temperature do I want in the screen? How do I want the light to look? What kind of music do I want to look? What kind of images and B-roll do I want to add? That's all wonderful. And now with AI, I feel like I've been given a whole new world because it's not even about like getting footage that I want to add or licensing stock footage that's poetic or metaphorical. Now I can like imagine something and pull it out of my imagination. You're pulling, they call it multidimensional latent spaces are where the AI pulls those images from. So I can just, with my words, I can prompt my imagination into existence. So I can take visuals that don't exist or visuals that exist in my dreams and bring them, like Willy Wonka, bring them to life and then turn them into video clips. And so I can tell stories with visuals that are literally otherworldly. And so the psychedelic puppet idea was inspired by my friend Brad, who's a wonderful animator. And he was doing these 30-second clips of famous people in history having a moment of illumination or taking a psychedelic and seeing the magic behind the veil, behind our lenses of perception. And what was cool about how he was doing is he was doing it in this comical way where somebody has this aha moment because they get visited by this strange, surreal, comical, absurd, psychedelic puppet. And I was like, this is amazing. He's talking about profound things, but he's being comical and absurd at the same time, kind of with a Monty Python-esque sensibility. And I love this idea. So I reached out to him and I was like, do you want to animate a story for me? I want to write something and I want to take this puppet idea and I want to have these puppets visit me in my Amsterdam adventures and feed me wisdom, but I want them to be really silly and absurd at the same time so that I can avoid ever taking myself too seriously. It's like I want to take myself seriously, but also laugh at myself. It's very important. And so we made this first film and we screened it at the Summit Series conference and it was really successful, 12-minute short, standing ovation. And I was like, this is a whole new palette, a whole new sandbox to play in. So then we made another film called The Arrival of the Puppets, and then we made a third short film called Once Upon a Time or something, but it's just about a black and white world where human beings are going through the motion, really depressed, really closed off, and all of a sudden these puppets come and bring color to the world. So again, it's a fairy tale for children and adults, And by the way, thank you for sponsoring one of our episodes. I really appreciate that. We're making another one now, and yeah, it's about making art and trusting that the art has always brought boundless opportunities to me. Whenever I have not had an agenda that was monetary, but rather from the heart and from the desire to express something beautiful, it has rewarded me in practical ways too. So I have that faith.
Yeah. Is money important to you?
Security is important to me, and agency is important to me, and freedom is important to me. And money is an instrument of extending your agency, and at least for me, also making me feel safe, and that it can put me in places where I'm protected.
Well, what's your most important personal value?
My most important personal value? Well, I think...
what drives you? Is it freedom or poetry?
I think those are, if I'm free, poetry naturally emerges.
It's flowing.
Yeah. My mom always said kindness was the most
very
important thing. Yeah, so she used to have this line that said, practice random kindness and senseless acts of beauty. What about for you?
Yeah, well, freedom. It's always freedom, independency. I want to be independent.
Yeah.
We created our own paradise here.
That's right.
I want to be free. Whatever happens to the world, we don't hope for it, but a war or whatever, a new event,
Sure.
We're living in this dream.
Yeah.
I hope we're safe here.
Well, but that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because you want freedom and you want safety and you're creating your world, but like it sounds like you don't worry about the world outside the walls of your property.
Oh, I do care. You know, I do care about the world and other people. That's why I'm doing what I do.
Yeah.
But I'm not afraid. You know, I sometimes watch the news, but I'm not afraid of what is going on in the world. I was talking to my sister. She lives in Poland, and I asked her, "Are you afraid of, Russia is invading Poland?" And she was, "I'm really afraid." And I was like, "Really? No, you're kidding me, But people are really afraid. And I can imagine, if you live there, maybe it's different. But no, freedom to me is very, very important. It's my driving force, freedom. But kindness, loving awareness is also very important to me, to be kind and loving to other people. Yeah.
Well, do you worry, for example, because personal freedom, personal sovereignty, sure, I have my beautiful house here in Mallorca and I feel very safe, but I have a lot of compassion for other people. And so I sometimes read the news, and even if I'm not worried about it on that day, but I worry about all the other people that are reading the news and probably getting worried about this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, I grew up in an international environment with friends all over the world. The last thing I want is like a lot of these like rabid Trump fans to start like hating Europeans, and all of a sudden like I love people. I want to hang out with like the American and the Swedish and the Danish and the Dutch. Like that's my selfish desire to hang out in the university campus with people from all over where we can talk about poetry rather than nationalism scares me. The fear of the other scares me because the dehumanization scares me, And how do you, I guess that's why you do what you do, right? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't know. I pray. I pray for myself, for my wife, for my children, for the people in the world. I meditate and I pray. I talk to God every day. I hope I can do something, to add something of value to the world to make it a better place, like you do.
Yeah. It sounds like for you, the beauty is settled, the personal sovereignty is settled. You have created your world, and it's quite spectacular. Do you think about how AI is going to change the world? Are you optimistic that innovation is how we solve the problems on the planet? Where do you think that's going?
Well, we need innovation, You always need innovation to make progress. As a human being, you have to innovate your consciousness, your awareness. I think if we can elevate our awareness, the world will change anyway. But the only thing, and I'm not afraid of it, but I think it was RoboCop or something, that the robots take over humanity.
Yeah.
What if, and I think more people are afraid of that, if AI takes over our human kind?
Yeah.
What will happen then?
So you worry about that a little bit.
I don't really worry,
Right.
I think I'm 55, so maybe in 25, 30 years, I'm leaving this planet for another one. So
what if the radical life extension stuff transpires? Wouldn't you like a couple more 100 years to read some more books?
I think I'm already over 1,000.
1,000 years?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I wish I felt that in my body.
Many more thousands to go.
That's a nice feeling.
Yeah. The only thing
that probably brings you a lot of inner peace, so you don't fear death at all.
No, not at all. The only thing is that when I leave this planet, I have to leave my wife and my children behind. And it's not fearful, but that's a little bit heartbreaking. Yeah.
But then if there was an option to stick around because there was a nice download app for your cells and you can be like, restore your vitality.
It's only temporary that we're here.
Yeah.
I really believe, I believe in angels and God and, whatever.
Yeah.
We go somewhere else where maybe we meet again. I hope so. Yeah.
Interesting. So there's more to the whole story. There's more to the mystery, and there's more just to the stuff we make too.
Absolutely, yeah. And maybe Alan Watts once told in one of his lectures, "What if this whole experience is just a dream?"
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that too.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know either.
Is it a dream or a nightmare? I think that's your choice again.
I think you. Yes,
it's up to us what kind of dream we want to dream, and that's our life.
It's very true. I mean, I think it comes down to that whole idea of agency and being able to like exercise the muscle of like where you choose to look. Thank God I had movies as a metaphor. It's like what's in the frame. What's in the frame? You can put, it's a lot harder to close your eyes and control your thoughts, but it's a lot easier, I think. Start with like what you look at. Start with like shaping the frame. Like, where do you want to live? What do you want to look at when you wake up in the morning?
If you walk around here, we have created beautiful places on the property.
Yes.
And the rest is a building site.
Yes.
So wherever you look, that's what you see.
That's right.
It's a big mess over there, but here we have created paradise.
That's right.
So it's all, what do you focus on?
That's right. What's in the frame and what do you leave out of the frame? And what do you choose to leave out of the frame? Yeah. And especially, I think for me, we didn't talk about altered states of consciousness that much, but I think a lot of what I've learned of how to shape what's in the frame in my normal baseline consciousness came through altered states. So whether it's experimenting, I used cannabis a lot, very mindfully over the years, never as a daily user, but definitely as somebody that appreciated upping the signal of my perceptual qualia. I was like, oh man, this like really puts up the signal. The greens are greener, the blue is bluer, the beauty is more radiant. It's like hitting a sustain pedal on the piano. Like you're playing the piano, but then the cannabis was like hitting the sustain pedal. But I learned about like the idea of set and setting. Like, what's the frame? Well, if you're in a beautiful place, if the frame is beautiful, the cannabis just like it brought resonance with the beauty. It made you sit in the beauty, marvel at the beauty. But if what was in the frame was negative, it was such a buzzkill. And so it became like similarly like switching the channel of the movie. I don't want to see this film right now. I don't want to watch this movie. Let's get that. Why you want to bring me to see this? It's a beautiful afternoon. I don't want this frame right now. I want this frame. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't times when you have to look at the difficult stuff. But you can also choose like when you're ready to look at the difficult stuff. But also to say, hey, today's a Saturday afternoon with a friend. Hey man, today what's in the frame is going to be the beatific vision only, And I learned that from my cannabis trips. And I was like, this applies in our normal waking state too. Choose your frames wisely.
Well, there's this story that if maybe you know this story, the tree falls out in the open somewhere, and no one's around. Does it make a sound or not?
Yeah, I love that line. Yeah,
yeah. I was like, interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's a book I read recently called The Blind Spot, which is about this idea of the problem with the science of objectivity and empiricism. They say that's one side of the coin, but it's not the end-all, be-all of materialism, as they call it, because they speak about what they call the view from nowhere, where it's like where we imagine ourselves outside the earth, looking at the earth, until we put a camera there. The idea of the imaginary view from nowhere. Like if a tree falls and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? Well, I don't know. I mean, does a tree even exist when there's not an observer? Quantum physics might say otherwise.
The other question is, who cares?
Also, fair enough.
And maybe this is so many people are filling their minds with stuff that is so unnecessary.
That's true.
Why are people filling their minds, their brains with negative stuff, and also, all the things they don't control? Why should you? Life is short. Live in awe.
No, I completely agree.
Enjoy the day. See the beautiness around you.
Yeah. Well, I think that any psychiatrist that did an evaluation looking at my life choices would say, oh, this is a guy that's extremely sensitive, probably has some PTSD from his upbringing, and intuitively found his own medicine. Like
born on LSD.
Yeah. But like also in response to trauma and negative emotion and wanting to design a life that didn't trigger my negative emotions. Like I cycling through the Dutch countryside or on a hike in Mallorca. That frame is a frame where I am marveling at the trees and the fellow cyclists, and I see a dog, and it's so beautiful, and I see the face of a child, and I see the face of God in the face of the child, and it's like I am able to be in realms where that feel just as real, if not more real, than reading the fucking news. I think I read the news a little bit to hedge my bets, just in case the deeper truth that I saw in the magical bike ride. Just in case it's not a deeper truth, but just some fucking cannabis-fueled delusion, and I need to watch the news just in case. I kind of do both. It's like I haven't fully surrendered to faith and beauty. I want to. That's my goal, to fully trust.
But maybe this is what life is all about, that we have to learn. Life is like a big lesson.
Yeah.
And if you're in first grade, you have a lot of problems, trauma.
Yeah.
You don't know how to overcome it.
Yes.
And you're in, I don't know, one of the highest grades, and you've been through everything, and you overcame all your problems, and you have a little trauma left from Venezuela. We all have trauma.
Yeah.
But the less trauma you face in your daily life, the more wondrous your life is. Life is full of wonder.
That's right.
But it's again,
for sure.
What's the frame?
Well, that's the thing. It's like,
and maybe most people are being framed. In that what the narrative wants you to see.
That's right. Yes, I unfortunately feel that outrage and panic is a big part of the attention economy. When information is cheap, attention becomes expensive, and it's easier to hijack attention via the brain stem. And there's a lot of opportunists, sociopathic opportunists that take advantage of that attention at any cost. And it's grotesque. And I see those that operate that way as being cancerous, and metaphorically speaking, like in terms of the system, they are parasitic and cancerous and operating from a lower vibration. But perhaps this is the last gasp. Perhaps this are just the pain of birth before rebirth and transformation.
Do you think we're at almost the bottom of human consciousness? We're so low at the moment.
I think that there is a lot of energy around low vibration. But it lives in parallel with high vibration because we also live in the safest world in all of human history. Hundreds of millions of people have been pulled out of poverty. Hundreds of millions of people have the leisure to go on vacation and go to museums and study
There's
things
still
just
a big
because
transformation going on. And it's not only now. I think, in my opinion, the transformation started the last century. And it takes about 100 years, and we're now maybe at the end that really the change is going to come.
For sure. And I act as if, I already live in the age of Aquarius in my own life. And occasionally I get sort of kicked out by past trauma temporarily, but I still sort of act as if and be the change you want to see in the world. I mean, that's what we're doing, right?
Beautiful words. Be the change you want to see in the world. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate being here. Thank you so much. All right.